Emergency Management Comparison Presentation by Mitchell Sutter. Course is Safety 712-22, Disaster Planning and Response. The instructor is Dr. Tracy Bachman. And today's date is December 7th, 2025. The first disaster comparison that I'm going to use is the Barneveld, Wisconsin tornado that took place on June 8th, 1984. It took place at 12:41 a.m. Central Standard Time, or Central Daylight Savings Time, excuse me, and it was an F5 tornado. This supercell storm produced 7 tornadoes throughout Iowa and Dane County and into Columbia and Dodge counties. The tornado that hit Barneveld was an F5. Estimated path width was 450 yards, and they did estimate winds over 300 miles per hour. Now, I'm going to give a little disclaimer here. I live in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. I was a member of the Mount Horeb Fire Department at the time of this event, although I was not on duty and did not respond to this event. I was involved with some of the coverage and assistance after the initial tornado struck and 2 days afterwards. So just for clarification. The other clarification or disclaimer I want to give is that I'm also a credentialed severe storm spotter with the National Weather Service, and it'll come out with the future slides. Therefore, a little bit of details. The path went right through the center of town. 90% of the village was destroyed. That means 93 homes were destroyed. There were 64 homes damaged. The homes that were not damaged were on the very southern edge of the village, including the township of Brigham facility was not destroyed or damaged. There were 17 of 18 businesses and public buildings destroyed. There again, the township of Brigham was one of them that was not destroyed. But was also destroyed was the entire fire station. All the fire trucks inside were damaged or destroyed, excuse me. All the equipment was lost. The only real thing that stood was the water tower, and you can see a little bit in the upper left-hand corner. It was determined the wind did push that water tower or bent it. It was no longer plumb at the time. I think the engineers determined it was 2 inches off plumb after the storm had hit. The ambulance did survive from Barneveld's EMS because they were returning from Madison after they transported for an EMS call. So they were out of the village when the storm hit. Therefore, when they came back into town, they found the remnants of the storm then. There were 9 people killed. Over 200 people were injured. Many of them were hospitalized. The damage was approximately $400 million worth of damage, and that was the 1984 numbers that were quoted at the time. So some lessons that were learned. There were no outdoor warning sirens that sounded. The National Weather Service was not aware that this tornado had struck until after it had already gone by. And the reason being, with the research that came, is this mega cyclone storm did not produce the typical radar images, what they call a hook, on their radar, and the technology that was available at the time. Therefore, there was no advance warning of this storm approaching and striking. And being that it happened at 12:41 a.m., most residents of the village of Barneveld were sleeping. So many of those that were killed were basically killed in their sleep, and the other injured were obviously woke up. The other thing that they know that it happened at that time exactly is there were clocks that were found to be no longer functioning when it hit. Bar time back then was 1 o'clock in the morning, and the bars that would have been open would have been cleared out by 12:30. So that would have been cleared out 15 minutes before the storm hit. There were watches out in the area that were issued by the National Weather Service, but there was still no real advanced warning. There was no such thing as spotters at the time. and that time for the National Weather Service. So the other lessons learned, there was no central or unified command. Mount Horeb responded from the east, and other Iowa County units responded from the west, and there was no overall incident command. Incident command was in its infancy at the time, and every department, had their own command. So Mount Horeb had Mount Horeb command, Ridgeway had Ridgeway command, but there was no really unified command. Also, there was limited radio frequencies, so there was really not a lot of way to talk to each other after the storm had hit. The other problem was this storm struck through not only eastern Iowa County, but that went into western and northwest Dane County, which meant that also basically took away all the western Dane County emergency services to attend either Barneveld, Black Earth, and communities that from them all the way up to almost the forest. So that was also complicated ones. And then again, radio frequencies tied things up. Mount Horeb was pretty much on a Dane County frequency, and it was hard to get other communities to talk at the time. I know, talking with others, reminiscing about this time. There was really no organization for regional resources until the very next day. Nobody really could see what happened until sunlight came out. And even then, there was a delay on getting things going. I do know that eventually volunteers came in, and the community volunteers came in, and they set up food pantries, and they set up food. They basically set up a food truck within the town of Brigham shop to feed the volunteers and community there. There was, however, when the Red Cross came in, there was conflict between the Red Cross and the local volunteers that had already things set up and going fairly smoothly. The Red Cross kind of came in that, well, we're here now, we're going to take over operations. And they basically did take over operations, and they did not acknowledge or accept the volunteer organization that had taken place up to that point. So there was conflict there. There was also some delay in getting the National Guard deployed during that time. FEMA was really not a thing at that time. Looking at records, that FEMA was just in its infancy, and FEMA at the time was more concentrated on doing and performing more or less nuclear fallout type drills. So the next tornado was the Oakfield, Wisconsin tornado that took place on July 18th, 1996. It happened at 7:15 Central Daylight Savings Time. That also was an F5 tornado. It started out as an F3, but then intensified. And they said that path was approximately 400 yards wide, and the estimated winds are 265 miles an hour. So there again, tornado path went down to the community, went through the center of town. There were 12 injuries, no fatalities. There were 60 homes that were destroyed, 130 homes damaged, and there were 6 businesses destroyed, a church and a canning factory. There was also a lot of rural damage with farm buildings and crops. The damage there again is $40.4 million in damage, and that was in 1996. $39.5 million was in property, then the other $900,000 was in crop damage. So some of the lessons learned there: outdoor sirens couldn't be heard because the homes were all closed up due to the high humidity. Dew point was almost or above 70 degrees at the time. There was some delay in getting a command center set up because of damage, but they eventually did get there. In the aftermath, communication and information delays on how the reconstruction was going to take place. They also had an issue where they were going to take their debris during the reconstruction. So some comparisons. So the Barneveld tornado struck at 12:41 a.m., where the Oakland tornado took place at 7:15 p.m. daylight, so middle of the night and during the day. No tornado warning issued versus tornado was observed by spotters. Therefore, with no tornado warning issues, there's no outdoor warning. With the spotters, outdoor warning sirens are activated, and residents had 8 minutes warning. There was, again, delayed response in state resources, where in the Oakfield, ICS was established. It was a common thing at that time. For the Barnable tornado, debris removal was actually done fairly quickly because there was an open limestone pit on the edge of the village that they were able to transport that debris to there and incinerate it there. Emergency services were quickly established in cooperation with neighboring communities, like Mount Horeb covered or supplied fire engines, and so did other communities. For Oakland, I think within 24 hours, the governor had declared it an emergency and there was National Guard involvement. So there were some comparisons. Technology today has changed dramatically on emergency responses compared to 1984 to what we are now in 2025. So that is also, it's hard to compare apples to apples just because of technology that has changes and that takes place today. There is a slide for my bibliography. I do have myself as a reference as a member of the Mount Hope Fire Department that took place in personal experience. And I thank you for that time.